People always ask how I balance my family life with 400 shows a year. I'm just doing what I love with the people I love. It's my magic life.
I like Wes Iseli. I like everything about him.
All right, guys, we are back. And this week it's spooky season. We're getting close to Halloween. 2 weeks left, a week left.
Yeah.
It's spooky season. What better way to have spooky season than to talk about Bigfoot, to talk about aliens, to talk about ghosts? Are you kidding me? Yeah, I brought this out.
That's awesome.
We had this person on the podcast before talking about her intuitive abilities and her real estate stuff and using intuition to sell real estate. And as we're getting off, I don't even think we talked about it on the air. We may have. But she's like, yeah, I run a really successful YouTube channel all about Bigfoot. We got to get you back real soon. We want you back on the Halloween episodes. So everybody, it's Linda Eastburn. How are you? Good morning.
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Dude, I am so excited for this. She said, she talked about MUFON. I might be saying it wrong.
What is that?
It's the alien research. She'll get into it. Don't worry about that. And Bigfoot and ghost stories and all of this. And I'm like, heck yeah. So yeah, when I got up this morning, she said, get out of here and be as quiet as you can. I'm going to try to get all the sleep I can. I said, no problem. I'm going through my closet real slow and quiet, trying to find my Bigfoot shirt. Anyway, Linda, thanks for coming on. Thanks for coming on, Linda. I appreciate it.
You bet. Yeah, glad to be here.
You said you stumbled into the whole Bigfoot thing during a documentary you were doing. Tell me about that.
Well, yeah, it was a weird thing. You know, I think in our last interview, I talked a lot about how I see things in the future and how intuition kind of works. But this was a weird thing that got me into the Bigfoot thing. I did not know a thing about Bigfoot. 2.5 years ago, I knew zero about Bigfoot. So that's where I stood. But I was doing a show called Intuitive Journeys, and that's on my channel also, so just Linda Eastburn YouTube channel. And it was going okay, but it was, it's pretty small numbers, views. It wasn't monetized at all. It was just, trudging along. And I just about decided to give up on that whole YouTube process just because that show didn't fly extremely well. When a friend of mine who's also very intuitive, she often asks me questions. We'll trade, just asking each other questions intuitively to see what we see for one another's lives. And she was thinking about making a pretty significant move in the near future. She asked me about that. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to ask her a little bit about my future. What does she see? And she saw some things changing. And then at the end of that, she says, and by the way, this is brought to you by Bigfoot. And I'm going, what? It's like, I know nothing about Bigfoot, and why on earth would Bigfoot come along and tell me anything? That was my response. It was just kind of like, well, that's just silliness. It just blew it off. But probably within that week, I was looking at my Facebook feed, and there happened to be a Bigfoot conference for the very first time coming to my neck of the woods. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Maybe I could find someone to interview and kind of bring them into the Intuitive Journeys show that we were doing, which was kind of a remote viewing process, teaching that and going out and doing investigations with remote viewing. So I looked through the guests, and there were only 5 people speaking at this one-day conference. I noticed this one guy really stood out, and this is intuition talking. It was Scott Nelson. He was a linguist. He had done some research on the Sierra Sounds, which is anyone who knows anything about Bigfoot is probably familiar with the Sierra Sounds. That was something that was recorded back in the 70s up in the Sierra Mountains by Ron Moorhead. Ron Moorhead's a big name in the Bigfoot field. I didn't know anything about the Sierra Sounds. I didn't know anything about Ron Moorhead because I'm not a Bigfoot person. But anyway, I saw this, that Scott Nelson was one of the speakers. So I set out to find Scott Nelson online, and he had no footprint online. I mean, I could not find this guy. I saw where he had been an instructor at a military school, and that's about all I could see. He was no longer there. He was retired now. That was it. So I ended up going to the conference and speaking with Scott at the conference and getting his email address from his son, sent him a message. Come to find out, he was only 3 hours away from me. And sent him an email, asked him to do an interview, thinking I would just work that somehow into my Intuitive Journey show. And he agreed. So I went to the 3-hour drive, got an Airbnb. A friend of mine went with me. We took 3 cameras, got, the documentary style, filming. of him talking about his work. He got 6 hours of filming. Came back with that. It was kind of exhausting to go through it. Scott is a great guy, very intelligent, very good person, but he tends to get off in, all different directions, in his filming. So not knowing the subject matter, not knowing anything about linguistics, not knowing anything about how the military takes languages, foreign languages, and dissects them, which was his job, to see what the inflections are, what they're meaning by what they're saying, all of this sort of things, what he did for a living for many, many years. He's very good at it. So he had run into the Sierra Sounds, come upon that accidentally, and said, wait a minute, this sounds interesting, and he decided he wanted to study that and the manner in which that he had when he was in the military, and he came up with this, Bigfoot has a language, supposedly. So I put that out on my YouTube channel. This was going to be the end of my YouTube channel. I was going to put this documentary out, and that was going to be it, period, the end. But it was a fairly good documentary, and I remember putting it out in January of 2 years ago, so that would have been 23, I think, that I put it out. And he was very articulate. We cut out a lot of it to make it make sense, to string it together. That's what you do in documentaries. You string together the information that makes it make sense. So we put it out there on a Wednesday. On Friday, I looked at it, it had 800 and some views. Now, that's still a minimal amount of views, but at the same time, it was twice as many as my Intuitive Journey show was getting. So I was really proud of that. I said, hey, that got 800 some views. By the time I got home, this was in a 2-hour span of time. By the time I got home at 5 o'clock that evening, it was up to 2,500 views. And as I'm sitting there having dinner, I'm looking at this 3,500 views, 4,500 views. It's up to 267,000 views. It monetized my channel. And suddenly I have this Bigfoot following on my YouTube channel. I only have one documentary up, but it was just boom, there it was. And so then I had to scurry and find people who had written books about Bigfoot or who knew anything about Bigfoot, because that wasn't my community. That wasn't anything I knew about. But it just took off. And now, I have, 14,600 subscribers to my channel, over 460 interviews of Bigfoot. I've learned a lot. I've spoken at conferences about Bigfoot. I've written a book, Threshold to Encounters, about Bigfoot, aliens, and ghosts, and the connections between those things. So that's how I got into Bigfoot. And it was truly an intuitive journey to do so, because I would never, ever have gone down that avenue on my own.
Wow. We just had Soul Sisters Paranormal. She's a lady that owns a haunted jail in Tennessee, and they go and do investigations. And I told her I was having you on, and I told her, the link between alien abductions and ghosts. And she said, yeah. And then there's links between ghosts and Bigfoot that I'm not getting. Can you tell me the link between ghosts? I get the alien abduction and ghosts, because there could be something in your room. Oh, aliens visited. Well, it wasn't an alien. It was actually grandma. Somebody came into your room. It must have been I don't know. But I don't understand the link between Bigfoot and ghosts. What's the link there?
Well, there's a lot of links between. First of all, it's a mystery. We don't understand exactly how this dynamic works. In all cases, it seems like aliens, Bigfoot, and ghosts, they come, they go, and they defy our physics. They defy the physical reality that we're in. Whether it be grandma appearing to you in your bedroom while you're trying to go to sleep at night, or whether it be some Bigfoot sound in the woods, and strange things happen with Bigfoot. And it's very similar to ghost experiences in that they're there, they're not there. They tend to have sounds when there's no visible information there. Up in the Sierra camp where Ron Moorhead was, so many things happened. They would go to sleep at night in their hut that they had, couldn't see out of the hut, but they would hear all of these sounds happening that was like as if something was in their campsite, just throwing pots and pans and logs and just destroying the campsite. So you've got that sound happening that they feel like they understand what those sounds represent. Get up the next morning, nothing is touched. Now that's a repeated story on the Bigfoot phenomena. Whether it's Bigfoot doing it or whether it's something else, we don't know. But at the Sierra, when they got the Sierra Sound recordings, they didn't see what actually made those sounds. It's a very distinct chatter kind of language, but it has, when you slow it down like Scott Nelson did, it really makes sense. It sounds like a man, a woman, and a child speaking a foreign language. That's what it sounds like. And it's a very distinct sound between the male voice, which is a deeper, guttural kind of sound, a female voice, which is a little higher pitched, and a child, which is much higher pitched. And it sounds like the man and woman are having some kind of a disagreement or an argument. Can't understand what words they're saying, of course, but that's what it sounds like. So at the Sierra camp, they had this chatter going on, which they recorded numerous times. They did have Bigfoot sightings up at the Sierra camp. They are assuming it might be Bigfoot, but they don't know 100% for sure that that's what made the sounds, because they didn't see what was making the sounds. It was very loud, very, very loud. But the fact that this whole camp sounded like it was being destroyed, but it wasn't, because it wasn't destroyed the next day, that's very ghost-like. That you're going through a house and you hear these strange sounds, you hear voices, maybe you hear very unusual things might be moved around or something like that, but you can't pin it down on, well, what is the phenomena that's creating that? Because unless you can actually get some kind of a visual on the dynamic, you don't really know. And we don't really know what ghosts are. We have assumed they are past presence energies left over. Sometimes they are, I believe, because there's a repetitive pattern. It's like as if they've done this before, they've been here before, and they can be seen lots of. I think one interview I did, a man was on a campus. He was going to school at a campus, and there was a ghost that was often seen there. It would be this same woman in the same clothing, and lots of people have seen her in the same building, and she would sometimes stand and talk to people even, but she didn't exist. She was not real. She, no one could place her there. She was wearing clothing from a different era of time, like 1800s or something. And no one knew this person actually. So, this was just an unusual phenomenon. But that happens with ghosts. With Bigfoot, they often see them making footprints, but there's no body there. I mean, footprints in snow, but there's no body to see. Footprints will just stop. And well, where did they go? What happened to them? We don't know. So there's a coming and going of both aliens, Bigfoot, and ghosts, that they appear and they disappear at will, it seems like, or by some means, and it doesn't match our physics.
We had a ghost experience that we just both shook our head this week. We're working this farm. Not that we know this farm is haunted. I want to tell you the farm story and Lana on stage. But we're working this farm and the wind is just whipping. And they had the ATM machine on the outside, because it's outside, right? So they had a ATM machine covered with a tarp the night before. And they always just take the tarp down and tuck it behind the ATM machine. Well, the wind had blown it up like near our stage. So I picked it up and just threw it over the fence. And it's a big tarp. So as I'm carrying it, I'm throwing it over. Somebody brushes by me. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And it wasn't the tarp, because the tarp is here. This person walked by me and I went to throw it over. Now, they have a lot of Spanish-speaking people there. So I was going to say, in my head, I had this dialogue going on. I'm going to say, excuse me, but I don't know if they're going to get that. What can I say? Sorry? Maybe they'd understand that. Yeah, I'll say sorry. So as soon as I've done it, sorry, there's no one there. And as I go on stage to tell Natalie, dude, I could have swore somebody was over there. Now, this is a fenced-in area. I had to throw it over a fence. There's nobody in that corner. But there's an exit from a Pizza Hut where they sell pizza out of a little shack over there. So I thought somebody came out the back door and was coming around just to see what we were doing back there, moving their tarp. So I figured it was one of them. And I was going to say sorry. And there's nobody here. So I run, and now I'm 15 feet from Natalie. I run up on stage to tell her, dude, was there somebody over there? And she said, as soon as I got up to stage to tell her that, she said, Wes, did you just say something to me? No. Yeah, it was a woman's voice. Somebody just spoke to me and there's no one here. It was weird. We both had totally different things happen. And she's 30 feet from me by the time I moved the tarp.
Right.
It was so weird. It was weird. It was just weird. And we did a show at Goochland County Parks and Rec. And my little girl, the first time we did it 5 years ago, my little girl, we had her side stage. There's a basement wing going downstairs. And I made my girl, because there's no wings on the stage. So I just opened the door and had the kids set in the loft going down the stairs. Now I have infants at this point, right? And they're not going to roll down the steps. I had them against the wall. My daughter's blocking the steps. And she said, it's just creepy down here. Yeah, well, basements are creepy. This year, she heard somebody, what did they say to her?
No, she thought that it was Lex.
She thought one of the kids were yelling at her.
Yeah. She was like, why is Lex over there?
Yeah, because we were running around, we're packing up our show, and in front of the stage, the kids are just running up and down the aisles. The show's over, we're packing up, heading out, everybody's left. And she's looking for my son, Lex, and she heard his voice calling from downstairs. I'm like, nobody came up here, honey. No, I heard a kid over in that corner.
But he's right here. He's out here with us. He's not down there.
And she was freaking out. And then we told the lady, I said, Lana, stop it. The kid's over here, and I'm poo-pooing it. Mm-hmm. And I sent Lana and the boys, which are now 5 years old, sent them to the RV, turned it on, turned the power on for TV. And I told the lady, I said, my little girl got freaked out. She's scared of those steps. She just gets feelings in here. It's silly. And the lady said, no, this place is haunted.
Yeah.
One of the people that used to be a janitor here committed suicide. And something happened to kids.
Trash cans will move. The janitor closet door will just open and shut on its own. She has like kids' toys in her office. I don't know what she does besides hire us. So I guess she works with kids somehow or another, because she has toys in her office. And she says someone will just turn on just randomly. And so just different things. Yeah.
Is there something with kids though there too? Besides like voices and things?
Just the toys that turn
on.
on.
Yeah. But it was just, it's weird. And kids have that intuition that they can sense stuff like that. I'm just poo-pooing it. But, you know, I'm dad. So she's freaked out taking the trash out at nighttime, Linda. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Nothing's going to get you. I'm not going out there. We had a bear in the backyard last night. But it's fine, honey. It's fine.
Well, that reminds me of a story. Being a real estate investor, I bought a house one time that was supposedly haunted. It had tenants in it. You know, we bought a lot of rental properties, but we bought this house and the tenants, after we bought it, they said, well, this house is haunted, you know. And it's like, no, we have no idea. But I think it was actually before we purchased it. We were just doing a preview of the house, and these tenants were in there when the real estate agent took us through the house to possibly buy it. And they explained how it was haunted, and all the neighbors told them when they moved into the house it was haunted, but they didn't believe them, you know. But she started explaining the things that were happening in the house. And again, it reminds me so much of what you were talking about with the children's toys, because they had children's toys in this one room downstairs. And they had this little fire truck, and like the ladder would just go up and down, up and down, up and down by itself. You know, these toys would turn on and off alone. Lights would flash on, off, you know, kitchen appliances would come on at times. It was just kind of weird and creepy. But come to find out, also a suicide had happened there. A woman with 2 young children had committed suicide in the attic of the house. And it just, you know, very, very sad, but, you know, nonetheless, so it makes you wonder if that, you know, emotional charge of something like that stays in an area and then causes some unusual phenomena. I don't know why it migrates so much toward children's toys. Maybe they're just easy to turn on and off, or they're just available. But appliances were also going on and off in this house. So that does seem to be a phenomena that happens around ghost activity.
Well, the ghost lady that we have on has talk boxes and things that will light up, and they can make the colors go from red to green and different things like that.
Light up different boxes. Like, yeah, if you're here, can you light up this one, but not this one? And this one goes off, like she asked. And it's interesting. It's very interesting.
So maybe the toys have similar on-off buttons.
Yeah.
That they can use those to communicate.
Figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about MoFon and how you got involved with that. I might be saying it wrong. It might be MUFON. I can't.
It's MUFON, yeah. Mutual UFO Network, actually. That's a nationwide network, probably a worldwide one, I'm not sure. Yeah, it was back in the late 80s, early 90s that I was introduced to this group that was meeting locally here in Springfield, Missouri. we had this flap of UFO activity that came through this area around that time period. And it was such a strong phenomena of UFO sightings that they made the news. And from there, you know, the MUFON group was introduced basically to the community. So I went the first time, and honestly, my view was, oh, you know, these are just going to be a bunch of weirdo freaks, you know, that I'm not going to in any way enjoy or associate with. But I'm going to go because I have an interest in what the heck is going on with these sightings that are happening in the area. When I got there, that they were meeting in this private room at a pizza place because it had a big screen TV that they could play videos on and such. So I go in and it is packed. Hardly could find a place to sit. It was just absolutely packed. And the guy that was running the meeting was very intelligent. He actually had a master's degree in psychology, I believe it was. A lot of the directors were, you know, well educated, well informed, interesting people interested in science, but a lot of them had had sightings too. So, you know, it wasn't just out of nowhere that they became part of this group. But I started attending this group, and at the time, I was working as a hypnotherapist, and you know, it was also a real popular time where people were going through regression, hypnotic regression, to try to remember. The John Mack books were coming out. There were several other people that had popular books about abduction. Communion had just come out not long before that. Those kinds of books, you know, Communion by Whitley Strieber. So it was a real popular subject. Well, come to find out, the guy that was running this, the guy with the that worked in the mental health profession, he was also a hypnotherapist and worked with a lot of people with hypnosis, but he was overloaded. So he asked me if I would also start working with people doing hypnotic regressions if they wanted a regression, and he just didn't have the time, you know, to do that. So I did. So that took me into a completely different area of research with the UFO in the UFO field. Mostly before that, it was just going to the meetings, hearing what everyone else had to say. Now I was in the throes of actually working with people who felt like that they had had some kind of an encounter with aliens, some kind of an abduction onto a UFO ship, possibly. Their memories were such that they had maybe a childhood memory of seeing a light outside their bedroom, or getting up to get a drink in the middle of the night and seeing a craft in the yard outside. Bright lights, things like that. In one case, a woman had a young child, maybe 7, 8. She opened up his bedroom door one night. The entire room was full of light with no resource for it whatsoever. You know, all the lights were turned off. And this was a different kind of light. It just permeated everything. It was so bright, it almost blinded her, things like that. And it's like, well, what's going on with that? We don't have a clue what's happening. But this was also a family that had had some UFO activity. She had not. The mother did not, but the father had seen some craft, I believe, prior to that. So this introduced me to a lot of people who had experiences. And I'll have one story that's kind of, it's a little bit on the conspiracy side, but I don't mean for it to go down that avenue. But it was during that period of time that, I was working with these people who had UFO encounters. And I was also a hypnotherapist, but I was so intrigued by the subject matter, the mystery of what was really happening, that I'd put out these, little feelers, flyers, ads, whatever, into the community. If you'd had felt like you'd had an experience, I wanted to do hypnotic regression with you. And I was doing this free of charge, just out of my own research curiosity. And I got a couple of calls from people that I wasn't home or whatever. This was back in the days when it wasn't cell phones. This was the early 90s. And so we had a landline phone with an answering machine. And they left messages, and I called them back, and they denied that they called. And one I know was a government office, that was kind of interesting and kind of strange. But it was during that period of time that I got a call from my mother one morning. We just check in with each other, one of those 10-minute calls. How are you? I'm fine. You doing okay? Kind of thing. Just chit chat for about 10 minutes. When she called, she made the comments like, well, what does that sound on the phone? Well, I didn't hear a sound on the phone, but she had on her line, it was always a little noisy. So I didn't think much about it, at all. But we finished the conversation, and she was hanging up, and I heard something. So I hung on to the phone for a while. I hung on longer than I talked to her, which was probably 10, 15 minutes, something like this. The strangest thing, I was just there in awe, because I was listening on the other end of the phone was the sound of, first it was this sound of metal against metal, like a drawer being pulled out, like a file cabinet drawer or something like that, you know. And then I heard footsteps, and it sounded, the best I can describe it, sounded like male footsteps because they were pretty heavy. And it sounded like they were on tile or concrete or something like that. Maybe 4 or 5 steps, again, metal against metal, like a file cabinet or something. And then steps back, you know, sitting down, you could hear a chair kind of moving around. And during the entire 10 to 15 minutes, now this is what's really freaky. There was this clicking sound. It was like click, 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 click. It was very rhythmic and very much consistent, like a tape recorder. Now, this was the days of tape recorders that were actually recording, you know, the turning the thing, you know, tape recorders. So I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, what in the world am I listening to? Why am I hearing this? Who is this? And why is it still on here? So there was a real distinct moment though, that there was a beep and it all ended. The clicking sound had ended. There was no more shuffling of feet, no more drawers opening. That was it. I hung on for quite a while. My hand was getting really tired of holding the receiver by then. But I was just flabbergasted because I'm thinking, what is going on? So I called a friend of mine. Now, you can imagine we were just like 2 people trying to brainstorm what the heck had just happened. And she didn't know any more than I knew about what had just happened. But she's thinking back on some mystery novels that she had read, but they were well researched. And she said, you know, there's a phone number you can call. And I knew about this phone number. You could call it, and if your phone was bugged, it would not give you your number back. But if your phone wasn't bugged, it would repeat your phone number to let you know. And it's what linemen used. Linemen who would be working on the telephone lines would climb up the telephone poles, you know, plug into this. They would dial this number, and if they were on the right number that needed to be fixed, it would give them the number back. That was the whole point of this telephone. So I thought, okay, I don't have anything else to find out about this, you know, mystery that was going on. So I called the number. Sure enough, I did not get my number back. It's like, oh no, oh no, oh no. You know, I know my phone is bugged. I don't know why. So that happened. And I called everyone I knew, had them call this number. Everyone else got their phone number back but me. So it's like, okay, something's going on here. It just happened to be that night was the MUFON meeting. Okay. So my husband and I went. This friend of mine who never went to the MUFON meeting actually did go that night. And they played this documentary film that Wendell Stevens, who was a Bigfoot, not a Bigfoot, but UFO researcher. He'd written lots of books. He was an ex-military guy. But the video was about a documentary he made somewhere in the South, might have been Virginia, I'm not sure. It was somewhere in the southeast of the US. And he had a whole crew with him making this documentary film about a guy who had been abducted by a UFO craft and taken several miles away and let out. And there he was, you know, he found himself far, far from home. So he was doing this documentary. The film crew at night were all staying in this one motel at the location. Each of them had their own rooms. And every person in that documentary crew was getting a phone call starting at 12:15 at night, 1:15, 2:15, and it would just be a hang-up call. And they would call and hang up, just waking everybody up. Just the strangest thing. And they never could figure that out. They went down and talked to the switchboard about it the next day. No calls came through the switchboard. That was what was really weird. So that was in the documentary film that we saw that night at MUFON. Went home, went to bed, went to sleep. Okay, well, this is the weird thing. Got a call on my landline at home, 12:15, 1:15, 2:15. Same time frame, hang up, hang up, hang up. So the next day I was just like, okay, there's something going on. This is really weirdly freaky. So then I started getting calls all times, day and night, these hang-up calls, you know, from 5:30 in the morning, you know, noon, 7 o'clock at night. It didn't matter. You know, it was all throughout the day. Randomly, I would get these hang-up calls. But sometimes they would come in really early in the mornings. And one day I was talking to my mother about this, and she said, wait a minute, I've got a hang-up call at the same time. We started correlating this. She was getting hang-up calls. And if I got a hang-up call at 5:30, she got a hang-up call at 5:30. If I got a hang-up call at 10 o'clock, she got a hang-up call at 10 o'clock. Then I talked to my sister and my niece, same thing. We were all getting these hang-up calls at exactly the same time. Now, talking to the MUFON people, which it took me a while to probably get this story all the way around to the people that were actually in charge of MUFON, they were having the same things happen to them. Why, we don't know. But for some reason, they were having calls where you could hang on and hear all of those same sounds, online. If you hung on, you could hear it. Also, anyone they called would start getting these hang up calls, kind of harassment of some sort. So that's my conspiracy story with the MUFON group and with just UFO research.
How long did that last?
Oh, it was a year or so, at least, that the hang up calls happened. I only heard the, where I hung on and heard those sounds. That only happened once, but the hang up calls went on a year, maybe 2 years. And we could not, how you can do research on who's calling you, short of changing our phone number, we didn't know how to get rid of this, but we did everything humanly possible with the phone company to try to stop this. And it was always an unknown number. They could not reach that number, whoever was calling. And we had a real estate company. We couldn't really just, change our phone number that easily. I mean, it was on our real estate signs, and, it was out there in all of our advertising. It was our office number, because we worked out of our house and lots of times. So we couldn't just get rid of it. It was one of those things we were just, kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Golly, the government reporting you doing that. I get it. They're trying to figure out what how deep you're in this world. But unless they're setting up robot programs to do that, if somebody's doing that, that's our government money paying them just to harass people. Yeah,
that's messed up. Yeah,
maybe
especially in the middle of the night or way early in the morning.
Maybe they had robots doing that. They probably had robots back then.
It was early 90s, that wasn't as popular back then, but I'm sure that they would have had some capacity to do so.
What is it?
It was
10, 15 years ahead of us in technology, so they're trying out new technology.
it could be, I don't know, but I mean, it was like, did they not want me finding out things? Did they want to know what I knew? Now, I was teaching hypnosis at that time too, and another really weird thing happened. There was a man that took the course, and these were small classes, right? They weren't like large classes. I was teaching out of my home, and I might have 4 to 12 students, right? And this particular class, I had about 12 students, which would have been the max that I could have done. It was a 12-week course. We met once a week. And this guy took the class, and he was a little out of the norm for my class. He was a stockbroker, he's a little bit more educated, a little bit upper crust, kind of a gentleman. Really enjoyed his questions. He had a lot of mind control questions, though, that I couldn't answer because that just wasn't my cup of tea with the hypnosis I was doing. I was teaching things more like, how to have higher memory, concentration, quitting smoking, losing weight, that sort of thing, and doing the regression work as well. So I think we're 4 weeks in, and because of the number of people in the class, I was having them come in an extra night for practice so that they could get all of the worth of the course. So Sunday nights we also met. We normally met on Tuesday night, but Sunday nights we also met just for practice. He was devoted. Every Sunday night he was there. Every Tuesday night he was there, asking really good questions. So this one Sunday night, he actually ended up being the only person that came this one Sunday night. And he started down this avenue of questioning some things that, I'm not a paranoid person, but this night I felt a little uncomfortable with some of the questions he was asking about mind control. And he reluctantly, and what I mean by reluctantly, he would start telling me something, he would back off, like he had to think twice about what he said or how he said it. But he started telling me about his life experience. He had moved to the East Coast from the Midwest as a young man going to college, and he had met a woman who was from deep pockets old money. I mean, deep pockets old money in the East. And they got married, and because he was part of that family then, his father-in-law and brother-in-law, all of these people that knew him, took him into this organization, which he would not mention, but he said, I would know it if he did mention the name of the organization. And they ran him up the ranks really fast. They were at the top levels of this organization, where you could go up the levels really quite slowly most of the time. They ran him up these levels really fast. So at this top level, they practiced a lot of occult things. And he was in a position where they used him to see what they could project and what he could receive. And it was like a testing case for what they would do with the whole body of people throughout across the US. You know, they would project these mindsets, they would project these advertisements almost like, you know, and so he could receive those really well. And so they used him kind of as a guinea pig, you know, doing that sort of thing. Well, he had long since gotten a divorce, moved out of that family, was no longer part of that organization, moved back to the Midwest. He was semi-retired now, just had a few clients that he worked as a stockbroker for. So that was kind of his life now here in Springfield, Missouri. But he felt like they were still projecting things to him and to across the country as well, because he would often see these headlines, like a newspaper headline, you know. He also could see UFOs in the sky. He was seeing UFOs on the walls. He was hearing things, you know, from like, you know, projected sounds, you know, voices telling him things. They were asking him questions. He was seeing things prophetically. He knew things before they were going to happen. And he didn't feel like he was initiating any of this. So he felt like maybe they were still projecting to him, or he was still picking up on a lot of the things that they were projecting. And he really was asking me about, you know, ways to stop that. But about halfway through this story, I suddenly got this intuitive impression. He's not here for me to help him. He's here to tell me that this happened. And I didn't know for sure why, but I kind of got the sense that his motives were not as pure as what he was telling me. I still don't know for sure about that. But this is the weird thing. He left that night. He left my house. We had class on Tuesday. 2 days later, this was a Sunday night. On Tuesday, I wasn't feeling well. I just didn't feel like I could teach the class. I asked my husband if he would call the students just to cancel the class for that night. He did so. When he called this guy's number, it had only been 2 days. It was disconnected. Never saw the guy again. Now, you know, that could have been totally innocent, but it just seemed very strange to me.
That's weird.
Yeah.
It was a strange time.
With him being there consistently every time and then just gone. Ooh, weird.
It was weird. It was a strange moment. It was a strange time of life period. You know, I just had the phone call where my phone was probably bugged and they're listening to everything. And now this guy shows up and tells me about this mind control program and these projections across the US. And then several years later, I started teaching remote viewing for the first time, my very first remote viewing class. And there was a guy that called and he was in the military. He was stationed in Texas. And I said, well, this is going to be like a 5-day class. Will you be able to attend? He goes, oh, sure, they'll let me. And I'm thinking, yeah, because the military always lets you offer, you know, continuing education and remote viewing, right? Or something like that. I thought it was odd that he knew he could be free, you know, to come to the class. When he walked in, it was obvious he was the only person that walked in the class was real buff, you know, he was a military guy, you know. And it was also obvious he already knew remote viewing. This was not new, you know, to him. He had tons of questions. And also he was the first person that I'd ever had a class with that took a picture of every single person in the class. So I always felt like he was there more as a spy into the class we were teaching and the people that were in the class than he was there for, you know, legitimately learning remote viewing, of course. So,
Recruiting.
yeah.
Recruiting.
Yeah.
Possibly so. Yeah.
Which student is the best one that we can see if they'll work for us? Yeah. Ooh.
Because we know that government's tried that. You know.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I've taken lots of classes with those guys. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So talk about aliens. I don't even know where to go. I have so many questions. I'm gonna just go in order here. We talked about real estate earlier. What do you know about disclosure? I don't know if you disclose haunted houses, but disclosure about a murder that take place in a house. Different states have different regulations on that. Where do you stand with your real estate business?
You know, I'm not sure. I haven't really sold that many, just that one house that I knew was haunted or that, you know, that a murder had happened in. Lots of people die in houses, so it's not murder. I think if there's a murder in the house, we're supposed to, you know, to reveal that. But so many people die. I've owned lots of houses where deceased people, you know, had been in the house because they died there. As a matter of fact, a house I was living in, which is kind of an interesting ghost story. One of my very few ghost stories that I've actually perceived something was a house that I was living in, and I was feeling something behind me. friends of mine were across from me that could see energy. They could see some movement back there, didn't know what it was. A few days later, this guy's son came to my house for a hypnosis session. I didn't know him. He was behaving really oddly, came in the house, kind of roamed around, didn't say much. I was like, what are you, what's going on? And then finally he said, well, I think my dad used to live here and I think he died right there. And that was right where I had felt that energy behind me. And this person could see energy movement there. I don't know what the laws are right now in Missouri as far as disclosing murders, but I think there's probably a lot more haunted houses where there's not a murder. It's just, someone died there and there's still some residual energy, I would say, from that.
My old house that I grew up in, my dad was 5'7", 250, 260 pounds. He fluctuated. And I was going from the basement upstairs to the kitchen with my dad. I was following my dad upstairs. I might have been 8 years old. But I felt something. I don't know what my dad felt, but I felt something brush by me. Now, this house was built for my parents. So there was no deaths in this house. There's no reason. Now, is the land haunted? Can spirits move? I don't know. But I got thrown against the handrail. I was thrown against something brushed by me.
Wow.
But at the same time, I got thrown by my dad fell. That's what freaked me out. Because we both hit the handrail at the same time. And I'm like, Dad, did something brush by you? Hey, what are you talking about? Okay. And that's all I ever said to my dad. But I will never forget it. Because it was like somebody was running by me and threw me against the handrail. And I'm following my dad up the stairs. And I saw him hit the handrail at the same time. But that house wasn't haunted. I can't explain why that happened. Weird.
Well, I might have an explanation. I mean, this is all theory, of course, at this time, but I remember doing an interview and I wrote about it in Threshold to Encounters, the book I wrote about ghosts and Bigfoot and UFOs. But this woman was living at a house with two roommates. They were going to college and they lived right across the street from a crematorium. And this house they lived in was really old. It was, it could have been haunted very, very easily. But what they began to notice was, because they could tell when they were cremating bodies over there because of the smell. And that didn't happen very often. It was just occasionally they would be burning, they could smell it. Okay. And they began to correlate that weird things would start happening in their house when they could smell that odor, that cremation thing happening. Things would be moved. There was a couple of closets she said she wouldn't even open during that period of time because strange things were happening in the house. But lots of things would be moved around. There were lots of strange sounds, all kinds of weird stuff. But they kind of would laugh about it. College students, they would just laugh about, oh, they must be, doing cremating bodies over there again because our house is haunted again. But this was really weird because several years down the road, she got married. They built a brand new house, like you were talking about. Your house was brand new. They built this brand new house in this subdivision that didn't have any other houses built there. It was, they were selling lots. They were the first one. They lived there 2 years without incident. Nothing happened at this house. And then right behind them, someone bought the lot and they started digging for the foundation to put in this house. And they were digging deep. I think it might have been a basement house. So, it was digging pretty deep into the soil. And all of a sudden, strange things started happening. She would be in one room and she could see, her husband walk by the door or whatever, and he wouldn't even be home. The kids were seeing, their parents in some places, they would think they were there and then they wouldn't be there. Their husband, same thing, they were hearing things, seeing one another and locations that they weren't there. All of a sudden, all of these strange kind of ghostly like activities started happening too. And so I'm thinking, well, what is it about disturbing, either the cells of the human body or or the earth even, we don't know if there might have been a burial ground there. We don't have any idea what might have happened, but is there some correlation between this disruption of cellular substance or biology, but the biological substance of things, and what activates some kind of unusual phenomena? So I started researching, even UFO stuff, and you do realize that the Roswell incident, that whole incident that happened where there were crashed UFOs, that was right after, the nuclear testing was happening within a very short distance of that very location. Also blasting, and causing there to be this disruption in our our biological atmosphere, just our atmosphere as a total. So I don't know if there's any validity to my theory. I'm just correlating what I'm hearing and the possibilities of that. So, even just building a new structure, can that disrupt, the molecules that exist in the air and the ground and, and whatever energy is present in that location? I don't know.
Yeah, no. Yeah, that makes sense. So I got all kinds of questions, and I'm going all over the place. So please bear with me here. Bigfoot was always just a big gorilla in the woods when I was growing up. Nowadays, it's like got 9,000 offshoots. They're aliens. They're time travels. They're interdimensional beings. They're ghosts. They're time travelers wearing suits. They're us from the future checking us out and taking notes and going back because they can't just show up what they look like now. So they're trying to blend in more. What is the most common thing? Are you among all of them, dabbling in all of those, just trying to figure it out?
In the 464 interviews I've done, it's been all over the place. So, different views, different opinions. I would say about 50% of them, though, are flesh and blood. This is some type of a being. Most of them will not go so far as to call it an animal. They think it's some kind of offshoot of human, maybe, possibly, some kind of a prehistoric, maybe, person, possibly, don't know for sure. We have DNA samples very likely from a Bigfoot, but they don't have anything to compare it to, so they can't be definitive with that. It's very, most of it's human-like, but, so is a banana. So, you can't really, judge it from that. I think that it could be any of the above. I don't know. I don't have enough information to really decide what I think it is. A lot of people think it's part of the fairy world, that they are creatures of the forest. They definitely they express themselves often like, legend of fairies, the creatures that come out of the woods, and they have been in charge of the forest for many, many, many years. But they also people have experiences with them that they come, they go, they appear, they disappear. There's sounds that you can't really explain. So I think we have to really look at the person that's having the experience and say, how do you process information? Because I'm a realist when it comes to seeing things and looking at things. I'm looking at it with just my 5 senses. I want to see a UFO craft the same way I would see an airplane in the sky. I want to see a Bigfoot the same way I would see, my dog sitting in front of me. I want to see, or a squirrel, traveling in nature. I want to see if it's a ghost, show me a person, a being, that I would see just like I would see a person. So I'm looking at things with just my 5 senses when I'm looking at these subjects in research. But I do understand, because I deal so much with an inner world where we perceive things differently. Going in intuitively, we see it in a different fashion. Even under hypnosis, I've done so many hypnotic regressions. Going in, we see things differently, we experience them differently, more dreamlike. So some people, just based upon their brain wave signature, see things differently than other people do. Because I'm kind of a realist, I'm very grounded in the way I perceive my 5 senses. I'm probably never going to see a UFO, a Bigfoot, or a ghost, with my 5 senses. I probably won't experience that. I could sense something, I can feel something. That's more of an intuitive impression, probably, where I'm sensing it from another part of me than just my 5 senses. So you have to know who you're talking to and understand how they perceive information, most likely, to really get a good bearing of what you're perceiving, how you're perceiving it, and how we can interpret what you're perceiving. And does that make any sense at all? That's pretty deep.
If I hear it from a hunter, they know a bear staying on its hind legs. They know what they're looking at. If you hear it from somebody from the city going on vacation into, Seattle, Washington, and they go on a hike and they see something, and, they hear noises.
Was it really?
Right,
yeah. Right. Yeah.
So the Sierra sounds, can I hear that on YouTube? Can I listen to that? Can I find that?
I think the BFRO organization may have it on there. And go to where you can hear it is on my channel. You can hear it by just going to Bigfoot the Language. That's the interview I did with Scott Nelson. As there's massive amounts of that on there, you'll get to hear it and have his explanation for it both. But I believe on that show he also plays it in its original form. Now you have to remember they have hours of this sound. So we just have, a small portion of it that he's talking about on the show because we wouldn't even have time. But I think BFRO may have it also on there. That's where Scott Nelson ran into it originally, was on the BFRO, and they call it some kind of chatter.
Yeah, no, I want to hear that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, but let me say one thing real quick. Okay. So people don't have pictures of Bigfoot. Why not? Why don't you have a picture of it?
All the pictures of aliens and Bigfoot, they're all.
But I have an explanation for that.
Oh, okay.
We're coming home one night, 2 a.m, magicians. We turn into our neighborhood, and there's a big black bear right in the road. We weren't expecting that. It's 2 a.m. And I'm like, holy crap. I couldn't make the turn in my RV into my neighborhood because he was blocking the road. So I inch. And
he's like, take a picture. So I got my phone out and I'm going to take a picture. And that's when he inches. And when he inched, then it was blurry. And then the bear ran off. I was like, well, way to move when you told me to take a picture.
But we were there a minute and a half. We were also in shock. The shock of the whole, there's a bear just in the road.
Yeah.
Wow. Take a picture and it was gone. So as soon as I thought to take a picture, it took off. And you can't, it's in the woods now. You wouldn't see anything.
Yeah.
You might see a blur. And that's all you would see.
Yeah, I guess so.
So trail cams, what do you think about why they don't have it on trail cams?
And the only thing you get on trail cam seems to be just that hair like hanging down in front of the camera. Don't know what it is, things like that. Yeah, trail cams don't seem to be able to. And also they seem to stay away from the trail cams. They won't get in front of them somehow, whether it be real or not. But going back to something you said earlier about there are no pictures, there's a Patterson-Gimlin film, which is a very, the original film is very clear. The one that we see generally is very grainy and many generations, past the original. But that's probably the best one. And a lot of people say, well, it's not real either, but there's a lot of reasons to believe it probably is. Analyzing the muscle of the body, humans don't have that kind of muscle. They can't move, with that type of movement. Even in a suit, it wouldn't show that muscle, that heavy body muscle. Also, it's a female, just on a ego basis alone, I don't think anyone making a Bigfoot suit would have made it a female. It's very obvious there are breasts on this Patty, the Patterson-Gimlin film. So given all of that, I don't think that's probably a fake film. Who knows, but probably isn't. So that's probably our best one. And there's a few others out there that also show that. People get film all day long. Today with our digital world, I don't trust very many pictures that come out. I just don't. So I don't repost those, and I don't put them on my Bigfoot Cryptid Midwest group on Facebook. I just don't even put them out there. A few of them that I know, I kind of trust them, but otherwise, but they're all blurry, and it's really hard to tell the difference between a Bigfoot and a stump, frankly, because it's just a dark blob back there in the woods. I know when we made Bigfoot, Byways of Bigfoot, we filmed along rivers a lot, and a lot of pictures out there where we were filming. Well, we were all there, and there were some seasoned Bigfoot researchers with us at these various sites. And I put a picture up, and of course the community was, oh, there's a Bigfoot, there's a Bigfoot, there's a Bigfoot. Trust me, there were no Bigfoot in that woods. We would have been aware of it if there had been a Bigfoot back there in the woods. So sometimes we're just imagining or wanting, the wishful thinking, that there's a Bigfoot there. Now, I can say, when we made that film, I did not expect to have any evidence. I thought we were just going to have a good time going out there along the Niangua River and filming and having fun, putting it out there. And what our end result would be is like, well, sorry guys, we didn't find any evidence, which is 99% of the films out there on Bigfoot. Repetitively, they find no evidence. But we were going to at least give them, an experience in nature, of us going out there and exploring. we get out there, and it was the strangest thing. We filmed in several different sites, and the first one was just a national forest. And we're just walking along filming just for the sake of having nature to film and doing some research, looking for things. We see this tree that about 10 feet up, there is this scratch mark where the bark's been off the tree. Now that could have been another creature, of course, and that alone would have been nothing. But then there's this.
But 10 feet up?
Yeah, it's about 10 feet up. It was way above. Yeah, it was way up there.
Yeah, that's true.
It was about 8 to 10 feet up, I think it was. So then just a short distance from there, just kind of within eyesight, there is this big branch of a tree that's been newly like snapped off. It's still there. So we make our way over there to film, and just to look at that, because that's a typical thing that Bigfoot does, just breaks branches down. There was no other branch around there. It wasn't like a storm or something had broken this branch. And it's a pretty good sized branch. I don't know, maybe about that kind of diameter, it's a pretty good sized branch. But below it, there is something they took pictures of that was a footprint of something, with toes. So that was just below this branch. So it's like, okay, that could have been something. It could have been nothing, who knows? We got all that and went on and filming along the Niangua. So we go to this next area. We're hearing things back by this cliff, and it's quite a ways from the river itself. So we make our way over there, and there, once again, there is this branch, about this big around. No evidence of any other trees being disturbed, no evidence. It was cold that morning. There had been a rain the night before. Doubt that there would have been anyone out there along that bluff barefoot, but there was a definite footprint below that break of the branch that was toes, and we measured it. It was a very large footprint right there beneath that. It's like, okay, that's really strange, but it is what it is, right? So we go on to this private property just a short distance from there, and we're just going around, around his land. He had quite a bit of land. We find a trackway that is through that property. A footprints, they were not super clear, but clear enough to be able to see that it was definitely movement in this area. We also find an area where something had slid down this embankment, and a very deep, heel print and the toe prints right below that. Another area on that property, there were some blackberry bushes. Generally, if it's water washes down blackberry bushes, they will go downhill, but these were pushed down uphill. Could have been deer, but it was a really large area. It would have to have been a huge number of deer that pushed them down uphill. So we don't know what that was, but that was the evidence we found along the way. I didn't expect to find anything, and we did find that all along this Niangua. Now the Niangua River here in Missouri is known for Bigfoot sightings. It's a good sized river. There have been many reports to the BFRO that are recorded. There have been also just local reports along this river. So I think there's probably something going on there.
Wow.
What was your question?
My question was, and hopefully it makes sense, and it might be stupid because I'm kind of on the outskirts. I hear things, but I'm not in the community. But I mostly hear things, United States with aliens and Bigfoot, United States. But I'm sure elsewhere there's sightings. Do the two communities several, all over the world communicate and get together and compare information? And is it very similar, especially with Bigfoot and everything as well? Like
UFOs are all over the world.
I know, that's what I'm saying. But do they communicate? Are they communicating and sharing information and seeing how similar things are? And really, for me, I'm more interested in the Bigfoot, like comparing, like, okay, are the Bigfoots similar in how they look, in the footprints that they leave, in the chatter and everything from different countries type of, does that make sense?
The chatter, but I do know that there isn't so much of an international communication with Bigfoot as much as there is with the UFO community.
Okay.
There are international conferences with the UFO in the UFO community, and lots of sharing of thoughts and ideas. With Bigfoot, they look different in different countries. Sometimes they don't have, even within the United States, one area of the United States, they may be tall and thin, or a little shorter. Some of them are more robust, larger stature. The chatter sounds, I don't know. The grunts, the howls, that seems to be some consistency. I've done several interviews from Canada, up north in Alaska. They do seem to be very similar to what they are here. I haven't done interviews outside of the US, I don't think, beyond Canada, on Bigfoot. With the UFO community, however, those are reported everywhere, and lots of similarities. Now, an interesting thing about UFOs, however, are aliens rather than just UFOs, is the small grays are mostly just reported by people from the US. In other areas of the world, they have different descriptions of what the aliens look like. Also, I was just listening to something yesterday, and this is true. I think there were a period of time in the US that all contact, the aliens looked like Nordic blondes, tall, thin, humanoid type people, and the message was about the same. This went up to maybe the 80s or so, where the message was, peace on earth, lay down your guns, lay down your nuclear weapons, let's all be friends here, let's bring peace to earth. Then it switched. Something happened. These little grays, came along. They were more robotic-like, doing abductions, probing people's bodies and gathering scientific information for something. Where that came from, I don't know. Also, the crafts have changed. It used to be a round disc-like craft, and then somewhere around the era of Star Trek, and all the movies, of UFOs. They changed. They became rectangular. They became more harsh, looking. They were no longer a cylinder in the sky. They became a triangular, very fast moving object, in the sky. So I don't know if that's just because we need them to look that way, or if they can change the way they look based upon what we will accept. I don't know. I have no idea. Does it change with our phenomena, or are we creating that phenomena? This is another part of that, with the I think it's C5 something meditation. And a lot of, I haven't tried this myself, but the meditation groups that I am part of that study UFOs, they will go out, they see nothing, but then they'll go into a meditation, the crafts show up, creating them at will, So is there something about our actual consciousness, our human psyche, that interacts with these things, and the way they appear, the aliens appear, the way the craft appear, and also that they appear at all, that has something more to do with the human factor than it does that they just show up?
Well, I've heard that NASA has a recording studio, a movie studio there. So the government gets to say what gets out into like we have to check with the government to put out movies and weird stuff. I don't know. But maybe they have to say, Independence Day's coming out. But I need you to tweak that UFO. That UFO needs to look like this, because this is what they have nowadays. So that maybe they're the ones putting the final notes on those movies.
So it's more acceptable?
So it's more acceptable, but also like putting in their 2 cents. Like, don't make them like this, because they don't look like that anymore. They actually look like this because they know.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right?
Could be.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So what do you think? So calling in orbs and meditation and bringing in aliens, that's a new thing. I've only heard of that the past 6 months, but now there's all kinds of people that are meditating by the ocean and calling in orbs and calling in UFOs.
That's true, and that follows suit with Bigfoot as well. That in an area where there is Bigfoot sightings, there will often be orbs in the woods, as well as the UFOs and ghosts. It's like we used to just associate lights and orbs and things like that with ghost activity, but it is everywhere. But there's this one guy talks about how we can create these orbs ourselves. He has some kind of a device, and if you it reduces some type of magnetic field in the brain. You have enough people together that meditate, then the orbs just show up out of that. I don't know. I've never tried that.
So weird.
What about people who have more experiences? Seem to, like, the people who say they've been abducted by aliens, but they're like repeatedly abducted by aliens. What do you think that is? Do you feel like that's truthful, or maybe they got abducted once, they got attention, so now they're saying they got abducted more? Or do you think some people are just more like open to it somehow, and so the aliens sense that and they come and visit more to certain people?
Well, I think that's a good question, but I don't know the answer to it altogether, even though that would be the type of person I would often work with regression work.
Okay.
You know, I try not to judge people's personal experiences because I'm not there. I'm not the one having that experience. So I just let them have that experience. That's their memory. That's their life. And, you know, but we can observe often, you know, what happens to people and why maybe that's happening. I don't know that everyone is abducted, but I think a lot of people might have some form of experience with aliens and they have no memory of it and they don't want to remember it. And there's not even a flicker of memory of it. So therefore they don't have memory. There are also programs. I know this one lady who had memory of she and her brother seeing a craft. She believed that they were possibly abducted. She started exploring that later on and went into some regression work, not with me, but with some other people I know, and had this whole elaborate regression memory of going on craft and having it repetitively, you know, having that experience. But then she started just becoming really aware that in her current life, and she taught at a university, you know, she was very well respected, very grounded person. She began to notice these military people were around, and she started having these dreams and memories, but there was a correlation between the military people and these aliens, and she was in the same room with both of them. And she didn't know what was going on. She felt like she was being abducted and then taken to these military bases, and lots of weird things were happening. And now, many years later, many years later, she has concluded that she feels like this was more of a mind control program and that she was part of this, and this was all projection to her mind rather than an actual experience that happened to her. Now, that kind of goes back to that guy that was in my house that said they were projecting all of these things to him, this occult, you know, group that was projecting all this information to him. And, you know, I don't know what the truth of the matter is, but I think that we have to really, I think we really have to be open-minded as to what any of this experience is. You know, I don't know.
So is there a way that you can tell the difference between a real experience and something that could have been projected on you? Like, you as somebody that has more experience in that, would you be able to tell the difference?
According to the people who have these experiences, and you know, holograms are very real like. They have the ability now to project a hologram that you can't really tell the difference. But if we can't tell the difference between a deceased person standing in front of us and a real person standing in front of us, I think we really have to question how much we can trust our five senses. Because how many people, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been told of numerous people that someone who has died, and they know they have died, there was evidence of their death, they're buried long and gone, will suddenly appear in their home and talk to them. Now, that has happened to many people that I know. Sometimes it's children, they'll see a grandparent. Sometimes I know a man that I deeply trust. He was in bed one night, getting ready to go to sleep. His cousin had died a few weeks earlier. His cousin appeared to him at the foot of his bed, talked to him. He said he could not tell the difference between that man and when he was alive. He could not tell the difference. So I think we really have to question what is real and what isn't real in any of our perception, you know, whether it be Bigfoot, aliens, ghosts, or just, you know, walking down the street. I think our perception abilities are very limited. We only have a very small window of light perception, you know, the different colors and light and depth and things like that. So I think we can misconstrue a lot of things. But beyond that, you know, I don't know how we tell the difference. Now, there is one way that I think that if a person is well versed in being very, very accurate with remote viewing, you might be able to get an answer to the truth on that, possibly.
Well, Linda, talking about perception and things projected in your head and seeing things, we've all seen those videos online of grandma playing the VR headset and afraid that she's going to fall off the cliff. And you just laugh at them. I'm teaching magic classes this week, and there's another class before me that's VR class. And the kid brought his VR equipment in. I've never played with it. I'm in this world. I put this headset on. I have to walk forward by pushing the thumb throttle forward. I'm not moving my feet. But once I'm in this world, I'm walking forward when I do that. My brain thinks I'm walking. It's so weird how just that quick I'm in that world. And then I walk to the edge of the cliff and I'm like, whoa. And I'm laughing at myself like, okay, what happens in the game if I fall off that cliff? Nothing. So I can go to the edge of the cliff and the game just stops. So I don't fall. But I'm thinking like if I'm falling in a dream, I don't, what am I going to experience if I fall off this cliff? So then I test it and I go and it just stops. But it's scary to look over. It's so weird. So if I could just put a set of goggles on and I'm in another world, I can't imagine if something's projected to in my head. The brain's weird, man.
Yeah.
How can I in 30 seconds be in a world where I'm afraid of my safety? That's just crazy to me.
And that is something in the UFO community I've heard many times. There was a woman who did not believe in any of this, but she came, a strange number of events happened that brought her to this place where she believed that she and her family were abductees. And one day she lived in a nice home, and it was a nice subdivision, and there was quite a bit of space between her house and the neighbor's house, but she needed to borrow something from her neighbor. She walked over, it was a beautiful day. She walked over to a neighbor's house, borrowed what she needed, was headed back to her home. And suddenly there in her yard, she stops dead still. And there is a craft landed and alien beings walking around the yard. She said the weird thing was, it was like she walked through a wall, just like you put on a headset and there's a virtual reality suddenly in front of her. She would normally have been very frightened. What she noticed that her emotions were very controlled and she wasn't frightened at all. She was in surprise, but not frightened. It was really weird. She stood there for a while, watched that, and then suddenly it blinked out and they were no longer there. Now she's in her emotions, terrified, of what she just saw. Went home and, had to deal with that reality. She had this strange opening of a reality. In other words, she opened her mind maybe to some kind of a virtual existence, which I think a lot of people that see these things often. Whether they be real or not real, I don't know. Are they physical? There may be some kind of physical presence to them. Not sure that we can tell the difference in some of that. It's just a very strange thing. But she was a college professor, not the same one I talked about before. She didn't believe in any of this. She had given her class an assignment to write objectively a statistics paper about how they could prove if Bigfoot, UFOs, or ghosts, or I think it was, are real, something like that. It was cryptids, I think was real. And some people were writing in about the UFO phenomena, and the UFO phenomena had the most research out there, I'm sure, for people to look up. But she just didn't buy into any of it. This is ridiculous. She didn't believe the research was accurate. She thought it was all made up. It was all a hoax. So she's traveling from her home state of Texas to California, and she's going to be on a plane for quite a while to a conference. She's going out there for a conference. She's in the airport. It was at the time when Communion had just come out. She sees this alien head and she goes, well, this will be a comical read on the way out there to disprove that UFOs are real. So she reads Communion on the way out. She comes home. She just throws the book down. Nobody's interested in that. She didn't believe a word of it. Her husband, however, has some pain, and she'd been dealing with a pain therapist that was taking her into like these inner level states to be able to release pain. And so she decided to help her husband by doing the same thing with him. It was a weekend. They couldn't get any help. So she takes him into this, kind of almost like a hypnotic state. I don't think they called it hypnosis, but they were going to the origin of the pain and then just release whatever caused this and be able to, maybe relieve some of this discomfort. He goes back to a period of time when he was a youngster. It was a holiday weekend. His parents owned a restaurant in Oregon, I believe it was. And they ran out of certain foods. And he and his father had to drive to another town because all the grocery stores were closed. All the places were closed. They're driving down this road to get to a grocery store to buy supplies for their restaurant. And they're stopped dead still. And there's a UFO craft in the road and abducts them. Well, she's freaking out because, she doesn't believe in this. And she doesn't believe that he believes in this. And now suddenly they have to deal with this whole thing that he has drudged up from his psyche about this UFO and being abducted by this craft. That opened a can of worms in their life. It just went on a roller coaster ride. And that's the same woman that saw the alien craft and the beings in the yard. And she spent a lifetime trying, she's deceased now, but a lifetime trying to figure out what the heck this was. And she was just pissed as hell about it. I mean, she wanted it to stop. She wanted someone to find out what this was and get it out of her life, because this was not her reality, but it became her reality. It was a strange story, very strange.
Wow.
Yeah,
Dude,
crazy.
it's been over an hour. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for doing this. Thank you. Everybody, Lisa Eastburn on YouTube.
Linda, it's Linda Eastburn.
Linda.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
Linda Eastburn.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Linda
That's okay.
I'm looking at my notes here. Linda Eastburn on YouTube. Check out. I know you do the Bigfoot stuff. Do you talk about the aliens and the ghosts as well on your channel?
I do a little bit, but honestly, I have such a Bigfoot following. That's the thing that's most successful there. I'm also getting ready to start a new podcast called Intuitive Diaries, and it's going to be about a lot more information than just the Bigfoot channel. So it'll be out by the first of the year, probably.
Golly,
Nice.
you are awesome. We could have broke this up to 3 different 1-hour podcasts, just talking about ghosts, just talking about aliens, just talking about one last question, and then I have to wrap it up. The AI Atlas thing. They're saying this thing's coming in and it's changing direction. It doesn't look like a comet.
Save that for Patreon?
You want to save that for Patreon? We'll do that.
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. So thank you, honey. Thank you. We were already way over time.
Yeah.
I love you. Thank you. This has been awesome. This is
fun.
just what we needed for the Halloween episode.
I was shocked when I looked at the time. I was like, oh my.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Everybody check out her channel. I watched 2 episodes and I've already subscribed, but it's awesome. She gets these people coming in. This guy was a retired cop that I listened to, that he had this whole thing going on with Bigfoot. It's wild. It's crazy. Anyway, thank you, Linda. You are the best.
Thank you.
So the Linda Eastburn YouTube channel. And what else? Do you have a website or anything people can find you?
I do, just lindaeastburn.com. You can also find me on Facebook, just Linda Eastburn. I also have a Bigfoot group, Bigfoot Cryptid Midwest. You can find me almost anywhere. Put in my name, it'll pop up.
Nice.
You're the best. The only thing I have left to say is see you next week.
Check us out online at wesisley.com and patreon.com/Wes_Iseli. For behind-the-scenes videos, blooper videos, never-before-seen footage, discounts on merchandise, magic trick tutorials, and more. That's Wes Iseli, spelled Wesiseli.